You've probably never once panicked about wasting an hour the way you'd panic about wasting $100. Lose $100 and you feel it immediately. It's gone. It's specific. You could point to exactly what it would have bought instead. But lose an hour and something strange happens. Nothing registers, no alarm goes off. You scroll for 40 minutes, or sit in a meeting that didn't need you there, or spend a Saturday doing nothing you actually chose, and by Sunday night it's already forgotten, filed away as if it never happened at all. Here's the uncomfortable math behind that blind spot. Time is the one resource you cannot earn more of, borrow, save for later, or get refunded, and yet it's the resource most people track the least carefully, by a wide margin. Money is almost absurdly easy to track by comparison. You can see your balance in 3 seconds on your phone. Nobody has ever been able to check their remaining time balance the same way, and that single difference, being able to see one number and not the other, is a huge part of why time gets wasted so much more freely than money ever does. Before we get into why this matters so much, if you're someone trying to actually understand where your resources are going, instead of just vaguely hoping things work out, that's exactly the gap this channel is built to close. If that's useful to you, subscribing means you'll have this in your corner the next time something in your financial life needs a second look. Here's what I want to make the case for today, and it's bigger than a lesson about scrolling less. This isn't a video about productivity. It's a video about something almost nobody talks about directly, which is how easy it is to spend your entire life preparing to live it, without ever quite arriving at the part where you actually do. I want to walk through 5 specific ways this happens, quietly, to people who are doing everything that looks responsible, and end with what I think the entire point of building wealth actually is, because I don't think it's what most people assume. Let's start with the most obvious layer, because it's still true and still worth naming, even though it's not the whole story. Some time loss is simply unconscious. It's the 20 minutes deciding what to watch, the 15 minutes scrolling through a food delivery app before ordering the same 3 things you always order, the recurring meeting nobody has questioned in over a year, even though it could have been a 2-line message. None of these feel like decisions in the moment. That's exactly the problem. A single wasted evening is at least visible, something you'd notice and maybe feel a little guilty about. A pattern of 20 minutes here and 15 minutes there is nearly invisible, spread thin enough that no single instance ever triggers the alarm a $100 loss would. I want to be careful here, though, because there's an important distinction that's easy to blur. Rest that's genuinely chosen and genuinely restorative is not waste. A show you love, a walk with no destination, an afternoon spent doing nothing on purpose, these aren't the hours I'm talking about. The distinction that actually matters is between time spent on purpose and time that simply happened to you. The kind you can't clearly account for afterward, the kind that leaves you feeling like you were somewhere without really choosing to be there. Deliberate rest and accidental waste can look identical from the outside, sitting on a couch either way, but they're completely different categories. Ask yourself honestly whether an hour left you restored or slightly worse, whether you closed the app content or immediately opened a different one because the first one didn't actually give you anything. That test tells you more than any productivity tracker ever will. This first layer matters, but it's also the smallest one, and I think it's the layer most videos on this topic stop at, which is why they end up sounding like productivity content instead of something that actually changes how you think about your life. So let's go further, because the bigger losses aren't hiding in your scroll time, they're hiding in decisions that looked completely reasonable the day you made them. Here's the second way people lose years without noticing, and it's the one I think matters most for anyone watching this channel specifically. Every recurring financial obligation you take on is quietly a claim on your future time, whether you think of it that way or not. Picture someone earning $120,000 a year, which sounds like more than enough room to breathe. Over a few years, without a single dramatic decision, they've taken on a $900 monthly car payment, rent that's a little more than it needs to be, a handful of subscriptions, a credit card balance that never quite gets to zero. None of these were reckless choices in isolation. Each one was affordable, each one felt earned, but add them together, and this person now needs their $120,000 salary every single month just to stay level. There's a specific moment worth naming here because it happens so gradually that almost nobody notices when it actually occurs. There's a point where a salary stops being something you earn and starts becoming something your life requires. Those are very different financial positions, even though they can look identical from the outside. Same job, same paycheck, same title. I earn $120,000 is a fact about your income. I need $120,000 is a fact about your obligations, and it's the second one that actually determines how free you are, regardless of what the first one says. Once someone crosses into that second position, the consequences show up exactly where you'd expect. They can't take 6 months off to care for a parent. They can't leave a job that's quietly grinding them down for something that pays less but actually fits their life. They can't take the interesting, lower-paying opportunity they genuinely love because the fixed costs they've accumulated have already spoken for that income before it arrives. Here's the sentence I want you to sit with. That car didn't just cost $900 a month. It quietly purchased a claim on your future time, because every dollar of required income is a dollar of your future labor that's already been promised somewhere before you've even earned it. This is the connection between money and time that most financial advice misses entirely. It's not that every hour needs to earn money. It's that every recurring dollar you commit to spending is buying a small piece of your future freedom to choose what your time gets spent on. A lifestyle that requires your full salary isn't just expensive. It's a lifestyle that has taken your future flexibility as collateral without ever asking whether you meant to offer it. This is why the emergency fund, the investing, the debt payoff we talk about on this channel were never really about the account balances themselves. They were about buying back the ability to say no. Every dollar of required monthly spending is a dollar of future time you no longer control. Every dollar of margin between what you earn and what you're required to spend is a dollar of future time you've bought back for yourself. Let's move to the third way this happens, because this one is quieter still, and I think it's the one that costs people the most years without ever feeling like a mistake while it's happening. It's the habit of waiting until you're financially ready to actually live. I'll travel once I earn a little more. I'll slow down after this next promotion. I'll go visit home once work calms down. I'll actually start enjoying this money once I hit a certain number. These all sound completely reasonable, individually. The problem is what happens next, which is that the number moves. 100,000 becomes 250. 250 becomes 500,000. Each threshold, once reached, reveals a slightly larger one just past it, and later quietly stops being a temporary state and becomes the actual shape of a life. Here's what that actually looks like, played out over years rather than as an abstract idea. Imagine someone who spends a decade telling herself she'll take a particular trip once work finally settles down. It's never really about the money. She has the savings for it most of those years. She has the vacation days sitting unused. But every year there's another project that needs her, another promotion cycle that feels too important to step away from, another reason this specific year isn't quite the right time. Then, one year, the person she always imagined taking that trip with can no longer go. The money is still sitting there, untouched, exactly as it was the whole time. The opportunity isn't. That's the entire danger of this third layer in a single scene. The finances were never the obstacle, the waiting was. Here's the distinction I want to draw clearly, because I don't want this to sound like an argument against saving or against delayed gratification, which is genuinely one of the most powerful tools available to anyone building wealth. Delayed gratification is powerful. Delayed living is different. Delaying a purchase you don't need yet, in service of a goal you've actually defined, is discipline. Delaying the parts of your life that actually matter to you, the relationships, the trip, the slower pace, indefinitely, in service of a target that keeps quietly moving, isn't discipline. It's just postponement wearing discipline's clothes, and the two get confused constantly because they can look identical from the outside. Someone saying no to a purchase today looks the same whether they're building towards something specific or just avoiding the harder question of what enough would actually mean for them. Let's talk about the fourth layer, because this one connects directly to something we've discussed on this channel before, and it's maybe the hardest one to see clearly from the inside, precisely because it doesn't feel like waste at all. It feels like ambition. Sometimes the wasted years aren't spent scrolling, and they aren't spent waiting either. They're spent climbing, deliberately, energetically, towards something that was never actually chosen, so much as absorbed. The bigger house, the more prestigious title, the neighborhood that signals something. The salary number that sounds impressive when said out loud. None of these are inherently bad goals. The problem isn't the destination. It's that a lot of people arrive at these goals having never once asked themselves a very simple question along the way. Here's a way to actually test it for yourself. Imagine two versions of your life running side by side. In one, everyone can see the house, the car, the title, the vacations, the income, exactly the way things are now. In the other, nobody can see any of it. No one to notice, no one to congratulate you, no one comparing anything. Which parts of your current life would you still choose in that second version where none of it is visible to anyone but you? For a lot of people, sitting with that question honestly reveals that a surprising amount of what they're working toward only makes sense in the version where someone's watching. That question matters more than it sounds like it should, because a huge amount of the striving that eats up someone's 20s and 30s isn't actually aimed at a life they've designed. It's aimed at a life that would look convincing from the outside to people who, if we're honest, are barely paying attention to the details in the first place. A lot of people aren't building the life they want. They're building the life they think would look convincing from the outside, and those two projects can look almost identical for years, right up until someone actually arrives at the goal and feels strangely little, because the goal was never really theirs to begin with. This is the layer where time gets spent not on nothing and not on waiting, but on the wrong something entirely, chosen for reasons that had more to do with an audience than with an actual life. And because it looks like ambition, it's the layer people are least likely to ever question, because who questions ambition? Which brings us to the fifth and final piece, and I think this is genuinely the point of everything else in this video, and honestly the point of most of what this channel exists to teach in the first place. Why build an emergency fund? Why invest consistently? Why pay down debt aggressively? Why grow your net worth at all, if not simply to have a bigger number sitting somewhere? The honest answer, underneath all of it, is options. The ability to leave a job that's quietly costing you more than it pays. The ability to care for someone who needs you without calculating whether you can afford the time off. The ability to take a real break instead of the version of rest that fits around whatever your finances demand. The ability to say no to something that pays well but costs you something you value more. The ability to relocate, to start again, to retire with actual dignity instead of anxiety, to simply spend your days differently than you currently do, because you have the room to choose. The point of building wealth was never just to own more money, it was to own more of your time. Every principle we've covered on this channel, the automated savings, the emergency fund that lets a car repair be a Tuesday instead of a crisis, the investing that compounds quietly in the background, all of it points toward the same underlying purpose, not a bigger number for its own sake. More control over how your hours actually get spent for the rest of however many you get. I want to be completely clear about something, because I don't want this video mistaken for an argument against ambition, or against saving, or against working hard. Build the emergency fund, invest the money, increase your income if that's genuinely something you want. Work hard, build something, aim high if that's the life that's actually yours and not one you've absorbed from somewhere else. None of that is the problem. The problem is only ever this: Don't become so good at preparing for your future that you forget you're spending your life to build it. The preparation was always supposed to be in service of an actual life, not a replacement for one. So here's what I'd actually ask you to do with this, because a simple time tracking exercise undersells what we've actually been talking about. This isn't about logging your hours for a week, though that's not a bad place to start. It's a handful of honest questions worth sitting with. Where does your time currently go, really, not the version you'd describe to someone else, but the actual, honest shape of your week? What are you currently maintaining, financially, that you don't actually value, the thing that's quietly become a claim on your future time without ever being consciously chosen? What meaningful thing do you keep telling yourself you'll get to later, once things calm down, once you hit some number, once the timing is finally right? What are you actually building all of this wealth for, specifically, not in the abstract? And here's the one I think matters most. If nothing about your life changed except your bank balance, would that actually be enough? That last question is the whole video, honestly. If the answer is no, and for most people it eventually is, then the account balance was never going to be the finish line. It was only ever supposed to be the thing that bought back your time, and time is the only part of this entire equation you can't ever get back once it's spent. Here's the thing about money that makes it forgiving, in a way almost nothing else in life is. Many financial setbacks can be rebuilt from. You can earn another paycheck, you can refill a savings account from zero, you can recover from a genuinely bad financial year. Money, unlike time, can often come back. You cannot earn another year of being 32. You cannot invest aggressively enough to become 25 again. You cannot compound your way back into a decade you barely remember living because you spent it either unconscious of where it was going, or trapped by obligations you never meant to take on, or waiting for a number that kept moving, or climbing toward a life that was never actually yours. So build the emergency fund, invest consistently, pay down the debt, increase your income, build wealth aggressively, if that's genuinely the life you want to build. Just don't become so good at preparing for your future that you forget you're spending your life to build it. The most expensive thing you're wasting was never money, it was always time. If any part of this made you pause, even for a second, that's exactly why Hannah Invests exists. I make these videos for anyone trying to build something real with their money, without losing themselves in the process along the way. If you want to keep learning that alongside me, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel grow, and it means more of these conversations find the people who need them. And before you go, sit with this one. If the next 10 years looked exactly like the last one, would you be happy with where they went?